I looked my father straight in the eye and warned him. One more word from my stepmother about my money, and there would be no more polite conversations. I would deal with her myself, clearly explaining her boundaries and why my money is not hers. Do you understand? He looked terrified, but he had no idea I had already set the wheels in motion to reclaim everything they had taken from me. My name is Dominique, and at 32 years old, I have built a career as a senior forensic auditor. I track down hidden assets and expose financial fraud for a living. Yet somehow, I missed the biggest scam happening right under my nose. It started on a Tuesday afternoon during the most critical meeting of my quarter. I was presenting a preliminary fraud report to the board of directors of a major tech firm via Zoom. My camera was on. My microphone was live. I was explaining a discrepancy of $2 million when my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. I usually ignore notifications, but this was a persistent vibration. 3 times in a row. I glanced down discreetly and felt the blood drain from my face. The notifications were from my Chase Sapphire Reserve app, the card I had given my father strictly for his heart medication and emergency copays. The screen read transaction authorized $4,500 at Serenity Luxury Spa, followed immediately by $2,100 at the Handbag Loft. My father is 60 years old. He does not get gold leaf facials, and he certainly does not buy designer clutches. I muted my microphone and apologized to the board, claiming a sudden connection issue. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from a cold, rising rage. I dialed my father immediately. The phone rang twice before it was picked up, but it was not his weary voice that answered. It was her, Wanda, my stepmother. Her voice was too loud and dripping with that fake, sugary tone she uses when she wants something. "Oh, hello, Dominique. Why are you calling in the middle of the day? Is it urgent?" I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Put my father on the phone, Wanda. I need to know why his emergency card just bought $5,000 of spa treatments." Wanda let out a dismissive laugh that grated on my nerves. "Oh, relax, sweetie. Your father is busy trying on a new linen suit. He looks so handsome. I just borrowed the card for a little while. Mother's Day is coming up and we need to look our best for the party. Consider it an early gift. You make so much money anyway. What is a few thousand to you? Do not be stingy. It is ugly." She did not even wait for my response. She hung up. I stared at the phone. The sheer audacity. She thought my hard-earned money was her personal piggy bank. She thought I would let this slide to keep the peace like I always did. Not today. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. I opened my banking app again. I saw a pending transaction for champagne. I tapped the card management tab. My finger hovered over the red button that said, "Report lost or stolen." I did not hesitate. I pressed it. "Let us see how you pay for that champagne now, Wanda." I could practically visualize the scene unfolding at the handbag loft across town. Wanda was undoubtedly standing at the glass counter holding up a line of impatient customers while clutching a limited edition leather bag that cost more than my first car. She would be tapping her long manicured nails against the countertop, waiting for the receipt to print so she could sashay out of there like royalty. But instead of a receipt, she got a loud reject tone that echoed through the silent store. The young cashier, likely terrified of Wanda's looming presence, would have looked down at the screen nervously. "I am sorry, ma'am. The transaction was declined," the girl would whisper, trying to be discreet. But discretion is not in Wanda's vocabulary. She would not accept that. "Run it again," she demanded, her voice rising loud enough for the security guard near the entrance to turn his head. "Do you know who I am? My husband has been a customer here for 20 years. This is a mistake on your end." The cashier tried again. Declined. This time the machine flashed a red light that everyone could see. The store manager, a tall man in a sharp suit, stepped forward and caught the eye of the security guard. He gave a subtle nod. That was the moment Wanda's humiliation peaked. The guard took a step toward her, his hand resting on his belt. She snatched the card back, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom. She did not care about the theft she was committing. She only cared that I had made her look broke in front of her audience. My phone rang again instantly. I answered on the first ring, ready for the storm. "You little witch," Wanda screamed into the receiver, not even bothering with a greeting. I am standing at the counter with the manager staring at me like I am a common criminal. "You declined the transaction. Unfreeze it right now. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I leaned back in my leather office chair, spinning a pen between my fingers, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "I know exactly how embarrassing it is, Wanda," I said, my voice dead calm. "It is embarrassing to steal money from a sick man's medical fund to buy accessories. But here is the situation. You are holding a card that does not belong to you. That is fraud." "Fraud?" she shrieked, attracting even more attention in the store. "I am your mother." "Well, stepmother, but I raised you." "You watched me raise myself," I corrected her, cutting through her manipulation. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You have exactly 20 minutes to drive to my father's house and put that card back in his wallet. If you do not, I am not calling the bank to unlock it. I am calling the police to report identity theft. And since the amount you just tried to spend is well over the limit for grand larceny, you will be leaving that store in handcuffs, not with a handbag." There was a silence on the other end, heavy with shock. She had not expected me to bite back. She thought I was still the quiet girl she could bully into submission. "You would not dare," she hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Your father would never forgive you if you sent his wife to jail." "Try me," I said. "The clock is ticking, Wanda." She let out a sound of frustration that was half growl, half scream, and slammed the phone down so hard I thought it might crack. But she did not apologize. She did not reflect. In her twisted mind, she was the victim, and I had just declared war. She was going to make me pay for this, and I was ready for it. The drive to my father's house usually takes 30 minutes. I made it in 15. My Mercedes tore into the driveway, and I did not even bother to park straight. I slammed the car door shut and marched up the walkway. The front door was unlocked, which was typical for Wanda, who never worried about security because she had never paid a mortgage bill in her life. I pushed the door open, and the smell of pepperoni and cheap garlic sauce hit me instantly. I walked straight into the kitchen and froze. There she was, Becky, my stepbrother Trey's wife. She was standing in the center of my late mother's kitchen wearing a silk robe that I instantly recognized as one my father had bought for himself. But that was not what made my blood boil. It was what she was holding. In her left hand was a slice of greasy pizza. In her right hand she was gripping the neck of a dusty, dark bottle. I recognized the label immediately, a 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon. My father had bought that bottle 10 years ago to celebrate his retirement. He had been saving it for a special occasion, and now Becky was pouring it into a plastic red Solo cup like it was fruit punch. I dropped my keys on the counter with a loud clatter, making her jump. "Put the bottle down, Becky." She looked up, blinking her wide, innocent eyes as if she could not understand why I was upset. "Oh, hey, Dom. Good timing. We ordered Domino's. Want a slice?" She did not put the bottle down. Instead, she tilted it again, filling the plastic cup to the brim. "That bottle is $500, Becky?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "It is not for washing down pepperoni pizza. It is a collector's item." Becky let out a high-pitched laugh and took a sip, smacking her lips loudly. "God, you are so uptight. Listen to yourself. $500 for grape juice." She set the bottle down on the counter, but kept her hand on it possessively. "You know, Dom, for someone so successful, you really have lost touch with your roots. Trey was just explaining to me how in our culture, well, your culture, family resources are communal. It is about the village, right? The African philosophy of Ubuntu. I am who I am because of who we all are. You have so much money, but you are so stingy with your own mother. It is actually kind of sad." I stared at her. A white woman from the suburbs of Connecticut standing in my black father's kitchen lecturing me about Ubuntu while stealing his property. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. "You are right, Becky," I said, stepping closer. My space was invaded. My father was disrespected. And now my culture was being weaponized against me by someone who treated it like a costume. "I do believe in sharing. Let me share something with you." I reached out and snatched the bottle from under her hand. She gasped. "Hey, I was drinking that." I did not look at her. I walked calmly over to the kitchen sink. I looked at the dark ruby liquid swirling inside the glass. My father would never get to taste this now. The seal was broken. The memory was tainted. If he could not have it, neither would they. I turned the bottle upside down. Becky screamed. "Are you crazy? That is expensive wine." I watched the dark red liquid gurgle down the drain, mixing with the dirty dishwater. It took a full 20 seconds for the bottle to empty. Becky stood there, mouth open, looking at me like I had just murdered a puppy. I set the empty bottle down on the counter with a definitive thud. "The village did not pay for that bottle, Becky. My father did. And since you and Trey seem to think everything in this house is free for the taking, consider this my contribution. I just saved you from a hangover. You are welcome." The silence in the kitchen was broken by the shuffling of slippers against the hardwood floor. I turned to see my father standing in the doorway. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. His shoulders were slumped forward, and the spark that used to define his personality was completely extinguished. He was wearing a faded cardigan that had seen better days, and he avoided looking at the sink where the last drops of his prize vintage were disappearing down the drain. Becky immediately launched into her performance, pointing a manicured finger at me. "She is crazy, Otis. She just poured your 1998 Cabernet down the drain because she did not want us to have it. She is out of control." I waited for him to roar. I waited for the father who raised me to ask why his unemployed daughter-in-law was drinking a collector's item in the middle of the afternoon. Instead, he just rubbed his temples with a trembling hand and let out a long, weary sigh. "Dominique, please," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stop antagonizing them. I am so tired. Just let it go." I stared at him in disbelief. "Let it go, Dad. She is drinking your retirement gift, and your wife just tried to steal $5,000 from your emergency medical fund. Do you even care that they are bleeding you dry?" He finally looked up, but he focused on a spot just past my left ear, unable to meet my gaze. "It is just money, Dominique," he mumbled. "Wanda is really stressed right now. You know how she gets when she feels judged. She wants this Mother's Day party to be perfect. She feels the house is not ready to host the society club. She wants to do a quick renovation on the kitchen. New granite countertops, new cabinetry. It will cost about $25,000. The air left my lungs. He was asking me for $25,000 after his wife just tried to rob me. I watched him wring his hands together nervously. "If you could just help us out with the deposit," he continued, rushing his words now. "It would make her so happy. It would keep the peace in the house. You have done so well for yourself. I thought maybe you could write it off as a gift. Please, baby girl, do it for me." I cannot handle her yelling anymore. In that moment, I realized the father I loved was gone. He had been replaced by this husk of a man who was terrified of his own wife. He was not asking for a renovation. He was paying a ransom for a few days of silence. I looked from Becky's smug face to my father's desperate eyes, and I felt something inside me harden into ice. I straightened my spine. "No, Dad. The answer is no. I am not giving you 25 cents, let alone $25,000. If Wanda wants a new kitchen, she can get a job, and if you want peace, you should try growing a spine instead of using my bank account as a shield. I am done enabling this circus." The front door slammed open again, interrupting the standoff. The sound of a high-performance engine was still humming in the driveway. Through the window, I saw a brand-new matte black Range Rover. It was a rental. I knew this because Trey had been blacklisted from every dealership in the state for defaulting on payments. My stepbrother strolled into the kitchen, spinning a key fob around his finger, wearing sunglasses indoors despite it being an overcast Tuesday. He looked like a budget version of a rap video extra. He surveyed the room, taking in my father's defeated posture and Becky's angry face. "Yo, what is the vibe in here?" he asked, sliding his sunglasses down his nose. "Dom, good to see you." "Hey, let me hold $100 for gas." This beast eats fuel like crazy, and my bank flagged my card for suspicious activity again. Their system is trash. I almost laughed out loud. You rented a luxury SUV for $200 a day, but you do not have money to put gas in it. That is poetic justice, Trey. His face darkened instantly. He walked over to stand next to Becky, placing a protective arm around her. "See, this is your problem, Dom. You are always judging people from your ivory tower. Mom just texted me. She is crying in the car because you cut her off. You sit on a pile of cash and treat your own family like beggars. You are ungrateful. You think you are better than us just because you have a corporate job." He did not wait for me to answer. He saw an opening to hustle and he took it. "But you know what? I am a forgiving man. I can fix this with Mom. I have a new project launching next week. Crypto. It is called Lunar Horizon. It is going to Moon Dom. Guaranteed 10 times return. You put in 10 grand today as a seed investor. It shows Mom you support the family legacy, and I will make sure she forgives you for the card stunt. Consider it a peace offering." Becky nodded enthusiastically, her eyes lighting up. "It is a really good opportunity, Dom. Trey has been working so hard on the white paper. You should support Black businesses, especially your brothers." I looked at Becky. She was looking at Trey with total adoration, completely clueless. She really thought she had married a visionary entrepreneur. It was almost cruel to burst her bubble, but they had pushed me too far. 10 grand. I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that for the liquidity pool, or is that to pay off your parole officer so you do not violate your probation again?" The room went dead silent. Trey's jaw clenched and his eyes darted to Becky. "Shut up, Dom," he warned, his voice dropping an octave. "Do not start making up lies." I turned my full attention to Becky. "Oh, he did not tell you. That is awkward. Trey was not in Europe on a business retreat for 2 years before he met you. He was in state prison for wire fraud. He scammed 6 elderly women out of their pension funds." Becky dropped her red plastic cup. It hit the floor and bounced, spilling the last few drops of wine. What she whispered, looking at her husband. "You told me you were a venture capitalist in Bali." I smiled a sharp professional smile. "He is a capitalist, all right, but the state of Connecticut calls him inmate number 48209. That is why he drives rentals, Becky. He cannot get a loan in his own name. He is a convicted felon." I picked up my purse from the counter. "I will let you two discuss his investment strategy." Before the shock of Trey's criminal past could fully settle over the room, the front door flew open. Wanda marched in, looking less like a mother and more like a hurricane in designer heels. She had clearly driven back from the mall in a rage, but the moment she stepped into the kitchen and saw the tension in the air, her demeanor shifted. She saw the spilled wine. She saw Trey's pale face and Becky's confusion. But instead of asking what happened, she decided to change the narrative entirely. She stopped abruptly in the middle of the room and clutched her chest with a manicured hand. Her breathing became ragged and shallow in a performance that would have been laughable if it wasn't so effective. "Oh my God," she gasped, leaning heavily against the granite island. "My heart. It is palpitating again. The stress. I cannot take this stress." She slumped forward, making sure to catch herself gracefully on the counter so she wouldn't ruin her silk blouse. "Otis, help me. Everything is going dark." My father moved faster than I had seen him move in years. He rushed to her side, catching her by the waist. "Wanda, baby, breathe. Just breathe. I am here." He looked up at me, and his face was twisted not with worry, but with pure, unadulterated fury. "Look what you have done, Dominique. Are you happy now? You are killing her. The doctor said she needs to avoid stress, and you come in here starting fires." I stood my ground, watching the performance with cold detachment. "I am a forensic auditor, Dad. I know how to spot a fake, Her color is fine, she is not sweating, and her breathing is controlled. She is manipulating you because she does not want to talk about the credit card fraud or her son's criminal record." Wanda let out a low moan, burying her face in Otis's shoulder. "Make her leave, Otis," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "She is evil. She wants to destroy this family because she is jealous. She wants me dead so she can have the house." That was the breaking point for my father. He stood up straight, positioning himself between me and Wanda like a human shield. "Get out, Dominique." He pointed a trembling finger toward the door. "Get out of my house right now. If anything happens to my wife, it is on your head. You are poison. I do not want to see you. I do not want to hear from you. Just go." I felt a sharp pain in my chest that had nothing to do with theatrics. My own father was kicking me out to protect the woman who was robbing him blind. He was choosing the parasite over the host. I gripped the strap of my purse tightly. I looked him dead in the eye and delivered the warning I had promised myself I would give. "Fine, Dad. I am going. I will walk out that door and I won't look back. But listen to me very carefully. Do not ever call me for money again. When the bank comes for this house, do not call me. When she drains your pension, do not call me. You just made your choice. Make sure you can live with it." I turned on my heel and walked out. Behind me, I heard Wanda make a miraculous recovery, instantly asking for water. I got into my car and didn't look back at the house I grew up in. They thought they had won. They thought they had driven me away. They had no idea that by cutting me off, they had just given me the freedom to take them down without mercy. The war had just begun. I woke up the next morning to a phone that was vibrating so violently it nearly fell off the nightstand. I assumed it was a work emergency, perhaps a client in a different time zone facing a crisis. I picked it up, squinting against the harsh blue light, and saw 47 unread text messages and over 100 notifications from Facebook and Instagram. That was when I knew. The smear campaign had begun. I opened Facebook first. At the very top of my feed, shared by aunts, cousins, and people I had not spoken to since high school, was a post from Trey. It was a masterpiece of fiction titled, "When Family Turns Their Back on You." Below the melodramatic headline was a photo of my father looking particularly frail, likely taken right after I left yesterday when he was stressed and upset. The caption read, "It breaks my heart to see my parents struggling like this. My sister Dominique, who makes 6 figures and travels the world, just cut off support for our elderly father and sick mother. She came over yesterday not to help, but to humiliate us and pour expensive wine down the drain while laughing at our financial struggles. It is sad when money changes people. We might not have much, but at least we have love. Please pray for my mom, her heart is weak." I scrolled down to the comments and felt my stomach churn. Not from guilt, but from disgust at the sheer ignorance of the mob. Aunt Linda, who borrows money from everyone, wrote, "Shame on her. I always knew she was stuck up." A cousin from Georgia commented, "That is what happens when you forget where you came from." Someone named Marcus, who I didn't even know, wrote, "If that was my sister, I would disown her. Send me her Cash App, I will send you $5, bro." My phone pinged again, a text from an unknown number. "You should be ashamed of yourself letting your dad starve." I took a deep breath and set my coffee cup down on the granite counter of my silent, peaceful apartment. Most people would panic. Most people would start replying frantically, trying to defend themselves, explaining that the struggling mother just tried to buy a $4,000 handbag. Most people would block the numbers and deactivate their accounts to hide from the shame. But I am not most people. I am a forensic auditor. I deal with facts, evidence, and paper trails. In my line of work, we call this creating a documented history of harassment. I did not block Trey. I did not report the post for bullying. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop labeled Litigation Support. I started screenshotting. I captured the post. I captured the timestamp. I captured every single lie about my father starving when I paid for his groceries weekly. I captured Becky sharing the post with the caption, Praying for my in-laws, so sad to see greed destroy a family. I captured the threats in my inbox. Click, save, click, save. They thought they were shaming me into submission. They thought the social pressure would break me and force me to open my wallet just to make the noise stop. They had no idea they were handing me the ammunition for a defamation lawsuit on a silver platter. I watched the comment count rise and smiled. Keep talking, Trey. Every word you type is just another zero on the settlement check you will eventually owe me. The sanctuary of my corner office at Stark and Associates was supposed to be the one place they could not reach me. I had built a fortress of professionalism here, where my family drama was just a distant noise that could be silenced by closing a heavy glass door. But at 2 in the afternoon, my senior partner David Sterling knocked once and entered without waiting for an invitation. He held a file in his hand, and his expression was one I had never seen directed at me. It was not the look of a mentor. It was the look of a liability assessor. "Dominique, we need to talk," he said, closing the blinds behind him. A gesture that made my stomach drop. In the corporate world, closed blinds meant termination or litigation. I sat up straighter, pushing my current fraud case files aside. "What is going on, David?" He placed a printed email on my desk. "We received a formal complaint via our ethics hotline an hour ago. The caller identified herself as Wanda Brooks. She claims to be your mother. She alleges that you are using your financial expertise to manipulate your father's accounts and that you have embezzled his retirement funds, leaving him destitute." She used the words financial elder abuse. The air left the room. Financial elder abuse. In my line of work, that accusation is a death sentence. I could lose my CPA license. I could be barred from practicing forensic auditing. Wanda had not just posted a mean status on Facebook. She had just tried to nuke my entire career. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck, not from guilt, but from the sheer violation of it. "That is a lie, David." I said, my voice steady despite the rage trembling in my hands. "Wanda is my stepmother. She is angry because I cut off her access to my credit card yesterday after she tried to spend $5,000 at a spa." David sighed, sitting on the edge of my desk. "I believe you, Dominique. You are my best auditor. But you know the policy. An accusation like this, especially involving a vulnerable senior, requires an internal review. If this goes public or if she files a police report, we have to suspend you pending an investigation." I did not waste time arguing. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I connected it to the office media screen on the wall. "Look," I said, pointing at the transaction history. "Every Friday for 5 years, a transfer of $400 to Otis Brooks for groceries. Every month, the mortgage payment for his house paid directly from my account. The property tax bill paid by me. And here, look at this. The declined transaction from yesterday at Serenity Spa. Does that look like I am robbing him, or does that look like I am stopping a robbery?" David scanned the numbers, his eyes moving fast. He saw the pattern immediately. He saw the tens of thousands of dollars flowing from me to them, not the other way around. He let out a long breath and rubbed his face. "Okay. This clears you internally. But Dominique, you need to handle this. We cannot have a crazy relative calling the ethics board every time you have a family dispute. Fix it, or I will have to put you on mandatory leave." I disconnected my phone and nodded. I understood perfectly. This was no longer just a toxic family dynamic I could ignore. Wanda had crossed the line from personal nuisance to professional threat. She had endangered the career I spent 10 years building just to satisfy her petty ego. As David walked out of my office, I stared at the black screen of my phone. I was done playing defense. It was time to treat Wanda exactly like the fraudsters I hunted every day. No more mercy. The sun had barely set over the Atlanta skyline, but the city lights were already blurring through the glass walls of my office. I was still sitting at my desk, physically present, but mentally exhausted from the interrogation with my boss. I had saved my job, but the victory felt hollow. I was packing my briefcase when my phone buzzed again. It was my father. I almost let it go to voicemail, assuming it was another guilt trip or a demand for an apology. But something about the timing felt different. It was late, and he usually watched Jeopardy at this hour. I slid my thumb across the screen and put the phone to my ear without speaking. Dominique. His voice was a harsh whisper, barely audible over the sound of static. Are you there? Baby girl, please do not hang up. I froze. I had not heard my father sound this terrified since my mother passed away. He sounded small, broken. I sat back down in my leather chair, my grip on the phone tightening. I am here, Dad. What is wrong? Are you hurt? I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end. He was hiding. I could tell by the echo that he was likely in the garage or the bathroom away from Wanda's prying ears. I need help, Dom. Real help. Not for the kitchen. Not for a party. I am in trouble. Serious trouble. He paused, and I heard a sob choke his throat. Wanda. She borrowed money. Not from a bank. Her credit is shot. She went to some people downtown. Private lenders. She used my name, Dom. She forged my signature on the promissory note. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what kind of people he was talking about. Predatory lenders who operated in the gray areas of the law, charging interest rates that would make a mafia don blush. How much, Dad? I asked, my voice dropping to a professional whisper. How much do they want? $5,000, he wept, just for the interest payment. It is due tonight. They called the house phone an hour ago. They said if I do not pay, they are coming to collect in person. They mentioned the car. They mentioned you. They know where you work. Dom, please. I have nowhere else to turn. I cannot go to the police, or they will arrest Wanda for fraud. I just need 5,000. I will pay you back, I swear. Just help me this one last time. My finger hovered over my banking app. $5,000. I could transfer it in seconds. I could stop his crying. I could make the immediate threat go away. It would be so easy to be the hero, to save my daddy from the monsters. But then I looked at the whiteboard in my office, where I had mapped out fraud schemes for billion-dollar corporations. I knew the pattern. This was the bleed. If I paid the 5,000 today, next month it would be 10, then 20. Paying a blackmailer or a shark never ends the debt. It only confirms that you are a reliable source of funds. I closed my eyes and forced my heart to harden. I love you, Dad, I said softly. But the answer is no. There was a silence on the other end so profound it felt like a physical blow. Dom, please, he begged, his voice cracking. They are going to hurt me. No, they won't, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Lock the doors, turn off the phone, do not open the door for anyone. But I am not sending the money. If I send it, Wanda learns nothing. She learns that I am her safety net. I am done being the safety net. I hung up before he could beg again. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I felt like a monster. I felt like I had just abandoned him to wolves, but I knew I had to find the alpha wolf. I did not open my banking app. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Roland, a private investigator who specialized in forensic asset recovery. I hit dial. He picked up on the second ring. Roland speaking. I need a full financial autopsy, I said, staring out at the city lights. The subject is Otis Brooks, and a secondary subject, Wanda Brooks. I want to know everything. Every hidden account, every loan, every lien. And Roland, I need it fast. I think my father is drowning and I need to know how deep the water is before I jump in. Consider it done, Roland said. I lowered the phone. I was not going to pay the sharks. I was going to hunt them. And in the process, I was going to find out exactly how much of my father's life Wanda had already sold off. The audit had officially begun. The notification from Roland arrived at 3:14 in the morning, lighting up my dark living room like a flare. The subject line was short and terrifying. Preliminary asset search, Otis Brooks Priority 1. I had been sitting on my couch staring at the city skyline for hours, unable to sleep knowing my father was terrified in his own home. I took a deep breath and clicked the attachment. I expected to see bad credit scores. I expected to see maxed out credit cards. I expected to see the $5,000 loan shark debt my father had confessed to. But I was not prepared for the carnage that appeared on my screen. The $5,000 was not the problem. It was barely a drop in the ocean. The first page of the report showed a title search on the house, my childhood home, the home my mother and father had paid off in 1998, the home that was supposed to be his safety net, his sanctuary, and eventually my inheritance. According to the county recorder's office, that house was no longer free and clear. 6 months ago, a devastating lien had been placed against the property. A high-interest cash-out refinance mortgage for $200,000. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. $200,000 of equity stripped away in a single signature. I scrolled down frantically looking for the disbursement details. Roland, being the best in the business, had managed to access the transaction history linked to the funding account. The money hit the account on November 15th. By November 16th, it was already bleeding out. I traced the expenditures, my forensic brain taking over even as my heart broke. A wire transfer of $50,000 to a shell company called TB Ventures, LLC. I checked the state registry instantly. The registered agent for TB Ventures was Trey Brooks. My unemployed felon of a stepbrother had drained a quarter of my father's home equity in 24 hours to fund his fake business empire. Then came the lifestyle purchases. December 3rd, $10,000 at a luxury travel agency. I remembered that date. That was when Becky posted photos of their spiritual retreat in Tulum, claiming it was a gift from a wealthy investor who believed in Trey's vision. The investor was my father. The vision was a lie. January 10th. $15,000 at a Mercedes dealership for a lease down payment. That was the Range Rover Trey was driving. February 14th. $8,000 at Cartier. That was the bracelet Wanda had flaunted at church. The list went on and on. 5-star dinners, designer clothes, spa treatments. They had been living like royalty for 6 months, not on earnings, but on the literal roof over my father's head. They were eating the house. They were drinking the walls. They were wearing the foundation. And the worst part was the account balance at the bottom of the page. Of the $200,000 borrowed, only $400 remained. The money was gone, vaporized, and now the bank wanted their payments. My father wasn't just broke, he was on the verge of being homeless, and he didn't even know the scale of the disaster yet. Forensic auditing is usually done in air-conditioned offices with high-speed internet and ergonomic chairs. But sometimes catching a predator requires getting your hands dirty literally. I knew from the credit report that the house was in trouble, but I needed to know exactly how much time we had. And I knew Wanda. She never threw away bank statements inside the house where my father might stumble upon them. She buried her secrets in the blue recycling bin at the curb, usually under a layer of grocery circulars and empty wine bottles. At 2 in the morning, I parked my car 3 houses down and walked silently to the edge of the driveway I used to play hopscotch on. The street was quiet. The house was dark. My father was sleeping inside, completely unaware that the roof over his head had been sold out from under him. I opened the lid of the recycling bin, carefully avoiding the squeak of the plastic hinge. It smelled of stale champagne and pizza boxes, the remnants of the party Becky and Trey had enjoyed on my dime. I dug past the empty Amazon boxes for the new shoes Trey was wearing. I dug past the luxury travel brochures Wanda had been browsing, and there at the very bottom, stuffed inside an empty cereal box to ensure it wouldn't be seen. I found it. It was a thick envelope with red lettering stamped across the front. Final notice. Foreclosure sale scheduled. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket and smoothed out the crumpled paper against the side of the bin. My breath caught in my throat as I read the legal jargon. This was not a warning. This was the end of the line. The bank had already seized the title. The property was scheduled to be sold to the highest bidder at the county courthouse steps. I scanned the document for the date of the auction. May 15th at 9 in the morning. I froze. I checked the date on my watch. Today was Wednesday. Mother's Day was this Sunday, May 14th. The auction was Monday morning. The cruelty of the timeline was breathtaking. Wanda was not just negligent, she was calculating. She was planning to host a lavish Mother's Day party on Sunday, pretending to be the queen of the manor. She wanted the champagne, the expensive gifts, and the adoration of her fake society friends one last time. And then on Monday morning, when the sheriff arrived to lock the doors, she would either feign ignorance and collapse in a dramatic faint, or she was planning to disappear before the gavel even fell. I looked up at the dark window of the master bedroom. My father was in there dreaming about a kitchen renovation that would never happen. Wanda had asked for $25,000 for a deposit on cabinets, but there were no cabinets. She was trying to squeeze one last lump sum of cash out of us before the house imploded. She was going to take that money and run, leaving my father to face the eviction squad alone. I folded the foreclosure notice and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I did not scream. I did not throw a rock through the window. A cold calm settled over me. Wanda wanted a party. She wanted a day centered around her. I would give her exactly that. She thought Sunday was going to be her coronation, but I just decided it was going to be her execution. I walked back to my car, listening to the silence of the neighborhood, knowing that in 5 days I was going to make a noise so loud it would shatter their entire world. The intercom buzz at 7 in the morning was the only warning I got before Becky invaded my sanctuary. I buzzed her up, not because I wanted to see her face, but because in an investigation you never turn away a source of information, especially one as loose-lipped as my sister-in-law. She stood in my doorway holding a box of stale donuts, looking around my minimalist penthouse with greedy eyes. She took in the floor-to-ceiling windows and the Italian leather furniture, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was estimating the value of my life, while trying to figure out how much of it she could claim. I brought her a peace offering, she announced, walking past me without waiting for an invitation. I just want us to be a family again, Dom. All this fighting about money is so toxic. I did not offer her coffee. I leaned against my kitchen island, crossing my arms. Cut the act, Becky. Why are you here? Did Wanda send you to see if I would crack? Becky set the donuts down and sighed dramatically. No one sent me. I'm just worried. Mom is really fragile right now. She is so stressed about the house and the party. She feels like you abandoned her. She just needs this Mother's Day to be perfect before she leaves. I froze. My forensic senses started tingling. Before she leaves. Leaves for where? I kept my face neutral, forcing a casual tone. Oh, is she going somewhere? Becky nodded, grabbing a donut she had brought for me. Yeah, she booked a month-long wellness retreat in Europe. France, I think. Or maybe Italy. She leaves Monday morning right after the party. She says she needs to clear her head away from all the negativity here. She wants to start fresh. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind with terrifying clarity. The $200,000 loan. The foreclosure notice set for Monday. The renovation money she was trying to squeeze out of my father. Wanda was not going on a vacation. She was fleeing the jurisdiction. She had drained the equity from the house, spent half of it on luxury goods, and stashed the rest to fund her escape. She was planning to board a flight to Europe on Monday morning, leaving my father behind to face the sheriff, the eviction, and the debt collectors alone. I stared at Becky, who was licking sugar off her fingers, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just confessed to being an accessory to a getaway plan. Does Trey know about this trip? I asked carefully. Becky shrugged. Yeah, he is helping her pack. He says she deserves it after putting up with your dad's financial mess for so long. My blood ran cold. They were all in on it. They were going to leave my father homeless and blame it on his financial mess, while living it up in Paris on his stolen equity. I needed to get her out of my apartment immediately. I had to call my lawyer. I had to stop that plane. Thanks for the donuts, Becky, I said, walking to the door and holding it open. You are right. We should make this Mother's Day unforgettable. Tell Wanda not to worry. I will be there on Sunday, and I will have a surprise that will make her trip very interesting. Becky smiled, thinking she had won. She had no idea she had just handed me the final nail for her mother-in-law's coffin. As the door clicked shut, I pulled out my phone. Wanda thought she was going to Europe. The only place she was going was down. The intel from Becky was accurate. Thursday night was the setup. I parked my car a block away and approached the house on foot, avoiding the motion sensor lights by sticking to the shadows of the neighbors' hedges. I let myself in through the side door using the spare key I had deliberately neglected to return. The house was quiet, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. I heard low murmurs coming from the dining room. I crept down the hallway and peered around the corner. The scene before me was staged with terrifying precision. My father sat at the head of the table looking smaller and more frail than I had ever seen him. He was flanked on one side by Trey, who was tapping a pen against the table rhythmically, and on the other by Wanda, who was rubbing my father's back with one hand while guiding a document toward him with the other. "Just sign right here, honey," she cooed, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It is just a formality. The insurance company needs it so I can pick up your heart medication without bothering you. You know how complicated they make things these days?" I recognized the document immediately. It was not a medical release form. It was a durable power of attorney. If he signed that, Wanda would have legal authority to sell the house, access his pension, and drain his remaining accounts without his permission. She was not just trying to steal the equity, she was trying to legally become him. I stepped into the light. "Do not sign that, Dad." The room exploded into chaos. Wanda shrieked, clutching her chest. Trey jumped up, knocking his chair over. "How did you get in here?" he shouted, moving to block my path. I ignored him and locked eyes with my father. "Dad, that is not for the pharmacy. That is a power of attorney. If you sign that line, she can liquidate everything you own. She is trying to take control before the foreclosure happens on Monday." Wanda turned on the waterworks instantly. "See Otis. See how she treats me. She thinks I am a criminal. I am just trying to take care of you." "You are getting confused lately, honey. You forget things. I just want to help you manage the bills. She wants you to die alone so she can inherit everything." My father looked from me to Wanda. His eyes were cloudy with confusion and exhaustion. He was a drowning man, and Wanda had convinced him she was the life raft when she was actually the anchor. He looked at me with a sudden flash of anger. "Stop it, Dominique," he snapped, his voice shaking. "Just stop it. Wanda is my wife. She takes care of me. You are never here. You just come around to judge us." "Dad, she is lying to you," I pleaded, stepping closer. "Get out," he yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "I said get out. I trust her. Give me the pen, Wanda." I watched in horror as my father took the pen. He was choosing his abuser. He was signing his own death warrant because he was too afraid to face the truth. I realized then that I could not save him with logic. I could not save him with love. Words were useless against the level of manipulation Wanda had achieved. I took a step back, raising my hands in surrender. "Fine, Dad. Sign it. But remember, I tried to warn you." I turned and walked out the front door, leaving them to their victory. My heart was pounding, but my mind was shifting gears. I was done being the concerned daughter. If I wanted to save him, I had to stop thinking like family and start thinking like a creditor. I could not convince him to leave her, but I could buy the ground they were standing on. I pulled out my phone and dialed my banker. It was time to execute the nuclear option. Friday morning usually meant strategy meetings at my firm. Today, it meant walking into the glass-walled conference room of First City Bank with a cashier's check that represented 10 years of my life. I sat opposite Mr. Sterling, the senior loan officer, who looked at me with a mixture of professional curiosity and pity. On the mahogany table between us lay a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. These were the foreclosure files for my father's house. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses and tapped the file. Miss Brooks, I must advise you one last time. This is a non-performing note. The borrowers are 6 months behind. The equity is negative. You are paying $215,000 for a debt that we were about to write off as a loss. From a financial perspective, this is a terrible investment. I looked at the check in my hand. It was everything I had. I had spent the previous night liquidating my stock portfolio. I sold my positions in tech. I cashed out my mutual funds. I drained my emergency savings. Every late night at the office, every skipped vacation, every bonus I had ever earned was condensed into this single piece of paper. It was painful. It felt like I was setting my own future on fire to put out the flames consuming my father. But I reminded myself that I wasn't buying a house. I was buying a gavel. I slid the check across the table. I am aware of the risks, Mr. Sterling. I am not buying this for the return on investment. I am buying the controlling interest. I want the assignment of deed of trust executed immediately. He nodded slowly and took the check. He didn't ask any more questions. In the banking world, money talks, and mine had just screamed. We spent the next hour signing papers. I signed the transfer agreement. I signed the purchase of the promissory note. I signed the assumption of legal authority. With every signature, the weight on my chest grew lighter. Finally, Mr. Sterling stamped the last document and handed me a heavy folder. Congratulations, Miss Brooks. First City Bank officially transfers all rights and interests in the property at 42 Oak Street to you. You are now the primary lien holder. You have the right to collect payments. You have the right to negotiate terms. And you have the right to foreclose and evict if the terms are not met. I took the folder. It felt heavy in my hands, cold and administrative. To the bank, this was just numbers on a spreadsheet. To me, it was the ultimate trump card. As of this moment, the bank was out of the picture. The foreclosure auction scheduled for Monday morning was canceled, not because the debt was forgiven, but because the debt now belonged to me. I walked out of the bank into the blinding noon sun. I took a deep breath of the city air. Wanda was probably at home right now, yelling at a caterer or packing her bags for France, thinking she had successfully run out the clock. She thought she was dealing with a faceless, bureaucratic institution that moved at a glacial pace. She had no idea that the institution had a new face. Mine. I was no longer the stepdaughter she could banish from the dinner table. I was her creditor. I was her landlord. And come Sunday, I would be her eviction officer. I got into my car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the party to start. I sat in my car outside the bank for 10 minutes just breathing. On the passenger seat lay the folder that made me the most powerful person in my father's life. But to the rest of the world, I was still just the ungrateful daughter. I needed to bridge that gap. I needed to ensure Wanda did not run. If she boarded a plane to France on Monday, she would escape the humiliation I had planned for her. I needed her in that house on Sunday. I needed her feeling safe, secure, and victorious. I needed to put on the performance of a lifetime. I picked up my phone and practiced my expression in the rearview mirror. I softened my eyes. I slumped my shoulders. I dialed Wanda's number. She answered on the fourth ring, making me wait just to prove she could. "Hello, Dominique." Her voice was sharp and impatient. "If you are calling to lecture me again, save your breath. I am busy packing." I forced a tremor into my voice. "I am not calling to lecture you, Wanda. I am calling to apologize." There was a pause on the other line. A heavy, stunned silence. I continued before she could interrupt. I have been thinking about what Dad said, about family, about how short life is. I realized I was being petty. You are right. I have been so focused on money that I lost sight of what matters. I do not want us to be enemies. I want to help. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, shifting from defense to greed. Well, it takes a big person to admit when they are wrong, she said slowly, testing the waters. So, what does this mean exactly? Are you saying you are going to unlock the credit card? I laughed a soft, defeated laugh. Better than that. I know you want this Mother's Day party to be perfect. I know you want to impress the ladies from the club. So send me the invoices, the caterer, the florist, the decorators. I will pay for all of it. Consider it my contribution to the household. I want you to have the celebration you deserve. Wanda gasped. Her voice instantly changed, dripping with that sickly sweet tone she used when she got her way. Oh, honey, I knew you would come around. I told your father that deep down you have a good heart. The catering bill is about 4,000. We are getting fresh lobster flown in from Maine. Is that okay? It is perfect, I said, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Get the lobster, get the vintage champagne, spare no expense. And Wanda, there is one more thing. I have a special gift for you, something big. I have been working on it with my banker all morning. I am going to give it to you at the party in front of everyone. It is the kind of gift that solves all your problems. Wanda squealed like a teenager. Is it a car? Did you pay off the kitchen renovation? Oh, I cannot wait to tell Becky. You are finally stepping up, Dominique. I am so proud of you. I will see you Sunday, I said, cutting the call before I gagged. I stared at the phone. She had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. She thought she was getting a check. She had no idea she was getting served. A moment later, a text message popped up on my screen. It was from Trey. Mom just told us the good news. Glad you finally decided to stop being a brat and know your place. See you Sunday, sis. I smiled a cold, dangerous smile. Yes, Trey. I know my place. My place is the owner of the house you are sleeping in. And on Sunday, you are going to find out exactly where your place is. The street. Saturday morning was a blur of excessive consumption. Wanda did not just want a party. She wanted a coronation. We stood in the office of Atlanta's most exclusive event planner, a woman named Giselle, who usually organized weddings for professional athletes. Wanda sat across from her, flipping through a catalog of seafood options like she was ordering fast food. I want the lobsters flown in live from Maine this afternoon, she declared, tapping a manicured nail on the glossy page. And not the small ones. I want the 2-pounders. And for the champagne, we need Dom Perignon. 2 cases. Giselle looked at me hesitantly. That is a significant rush order expense, Ms. Brooks. The logistics alone will cost an extra $2,000. I smiled, pulling my Black American Express card from my wallet. Do it, Giselle. My stepmother deserves the best. Money is no object today. Wanda beamed at me. See? I told you she changed. She finally realized that you cannot take it with you. I handed the card over, watching Giselle swipe it. The machine beeped approved. $6,000 for seafood. $4,000 for alcohol. $3,000 for flowers. I took the receipt and folded it neatly into my purse, placing it right next to the purchase agreement for the house. Wanda thought this was a gift. In my ledger, this was a line item labeled recovery costs. Every shrimp, every bubble of champagne, every petal was being added to the moral and financial tab I was about to cash in. I was not paying for a party. I was paying for the stage design of her public humiliation. By the time we got back to the house, delivery trucks were already lining up in the driveway. The transformation was instant. The faded siding of the house was covered in silk drapes. The patchy lawn was hidden under rented flooring. It looked expensive. It looked successful. It looked like a lie. I stood by the buffet table watching the caterers set up a tower of ice when Becky sidled up to me. She was holding a glass of the expensive champagne I had just bought, testing the merchandise early. She looked at me with a newfound respect that I found nauseating. You really stepped up, Dom, she said, popping a grape into her mouth. I mean, I was skeptical when you said you wanted to make peace, but you really put your money where your mouth is. This spread is incredible. Mom is so happy. She is actually relaxing for once. I sipped my sparkling water. That is the goal, Becky. I want everyone to be happy. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, since you are in such a giving mood, I was wondering. That vintage Chanel bag you carried last Christmas, the black quilted one, you never wear it anymore. And since you are clearly upgrading your life, I thought maybe you could pass it down. You know, keep it in the family. It would go perfectly with the dress I bought for the party. I looked at her. The audacity was breathtaking. I had just saved the house from foreclosure, though she did not know it yet, paid for this entire circus, and she was already asking for more. She saw me not as a sister, but as a luxury vending machine. I smiled a tight, thin smile. You want the Chanel bag? Her eyes lit up. If you are not using it, I will tell you what Becky, I said, patting her arm. You focus on enjoying the party tomorrow. Eat the lobster, drink the champagne, really soak it in. And when the party is over, we will talk about who gets to keep what. I promise you by Monday morning you will have everything you deserve. She squealed and hugged me sideways, not catching the double meaning. You are the best, Dom. Seriously. I watched her walk away to instruct the staff on how to arrange the napkins. Enjoy the champagne, Becky. It is the last expensive thing you will ever taste. The sound of power drills echoed through the house at 8 in the morning, clashing violently with the smooth jazz playlist Wanda had selected for the party prep. I had hired a rush crew of contractors, ostensibly to measure the kitchen for the renovation Wanda had demanded. But the men in the blue coveralls were not measuring for cabinets. They were technicians from a private security firm I used for high-risk corporate audits. I stood in the center of the kitchen holding a tablet directing the foreman with authoritative precision, while Wanda hovered nearby clutching a mimosa and looking pleased with herself. I want the motion sensors here, here, and here, I said, pointing to the corners of the room. And the panoramic camera goes right above the breakfast nook. If we are putting in $50,000 worth of Italian appliances, I want 4K resolution surveillance. We cannot risk anyone damaging the new investment. Wanda nodded enthusiastically, her eyes gleaming at the mention of the expensive appliances. You are so right, Dominique, she chirped, taking a sip of her drink. We have to protect our assets. You know how careless the cleaning staff can be. Good thinking. She looked at the sleek black camera lens being mounted on the ceiling and smiled, completely unaware that she was staring directly into the barrel of a loaded gun. She thought the camera was there to catch a maid stealing silver spoons. She had no idea it was there to catch a wife stealing a life. By noon, the technicians had left and the house was buzzing with florists and caterers. I retreated to my car parked down the street, claiming I needed to make a conference call. I pulled out my iPad and opened the security app. The feed was crystal clear. The audio was studio quality. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and waited. It did not take long. The kitchen cleared out as the caterers moved to the backyard, leaving the space empty except for two people, Wanda and Trey. They walked into the frame thinking they were alone. Trey leaned against the counter eating a shrimp from the cocktail platter, while Wanda checked her reflection in the microwave door. So is everything packed? Trey asked, his voice low, but perfectly audible on my screen. Wanda laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. Everything that matters. The jewelry, the cash, and the bearer bonds are in my carry-on. The flight leaves at noon tomorrow. By the time the sheriff shows up to evict Otis, we will be sipping wine in first class over the Atlantic. Trey chuckled, shaking his head. You are cold, Mom. What about Otis? He is going to have a heart attack when he sees the eviction notice. Wanda waved her hand dismissively, her face twisting into a sneer. Let him have a heart attack. It would save us a divorce lawyer. The old fool is useless anyway, Trey. He is senile and broke. He actually thinks I love him. I wasted 10 years waiting for him to die and leave me something, but he just keeps living and getting poorer. I am done. Let Dominique deal with the mess. She wants to be the dutiful daughter so bad, let her pay for his nursing home. I am taking my retirement now. I hit the record button and then the save button. My hand was steady, my breathing was calm. I had it. The smoking gun. I had her on tape calling my father a useless old fool and admitting to grand larceny and conspiracy to abandon a vulnerable adult. I closed the iPad and looked at the house. Enjoy the party, Wanda. Eat the shrimp, drink the wine, because tomorrow you are not going to France. You are going to hell, and I am driving the bus. The house was eerily quiet when I returned later that evening. The frantic energy of the caterers and decorators had subsided, leaving behind a pristine stage set for tomorrow's drama. The living room was draped in white silk, and the smell of fresh lilies was overwhelming, almost masking the scent of the decay that lay beneath the surface of this family. I found my father in the master bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at a garment bag hanging on the closet door. He looked up when I entered, and a smile broke across his tired face. It was a genuine smile, the kind I hadn't seen in months. "Hey, baby girl," he said, patting the spot next to him. "Come look at this. Wanda just gave it to me. She said, since she is getting a new kitchen and going on a trip, she wanted me to have something special too." He unzipped the bag with trembling hands, revealing a navy blue suit. "It is Italian wool," he whispered reverently, running his hand down the sleeve. "She said she bought it at that boutique downtown, the one where the senators shop. She said it cost her $800. She really wants me to look like the man of the house tomorrow." I stepped closer, my auditor's eyes scanning the fabric automatically. It was a reflex I couldn't turn off. I reached out and touched the lapel. It wasn't Italian wool, it was a stiff polyester blend. I checked the stitching on the shoulder. It was uneven. And then I saw it. A faint discoloration on the inner lining and the distinct smell of industrial mothballs. This wasn't a boutique purchase. This was a thrift store find, likely purchased for $10 and dry cleaned to look passable. Wanda had pocketed the rest of the imaginary budget just like she did with everything else. "She loves me, Dom," my father said, oblivious to my inspection. "I know you and her have had your differences. I know yesterday was rough. But look at this. She is trying. We are going to be okay. This family is finally healing." I looked at him standing there in his socks, holding up a piece of junk that he thought was a treasure, because the woman he loved told him so. He was so desperate for peace that he had blinded himself to reality. He believed the lie because the truth was too painful to bear. If I told him now about the foreclosure or the recording or the flight to France, it would kill him. He wasn't strong enough to hear it in private where Wanda could talk her way out of it. He needed to see it. He needed the shock to restart his heart. "You look sharp, Dad," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "You are going to look like $1,000,000 tomorrow." He beamed, hanging the suit back up with care. "I am just so glad you are paying for the party, Dom. It really took the pressure off. I think tomorrow is going to be the best day we have had in years." I kissed his forehead, feeling the papery thinness of his skin. "Get some sleep, Dad," I said softly. "You are going to need your strength." I walked out of the room and down the hallway, past the surveillance camera I had installed that morning. My father was right about one thing. Tomorrow was going to be memorable. But as I walked to my car in the dark driveway, I wiped a single tear from my cheek. I felt like a surgeon preparing for an amputation. I knew that in order to save the patient, I had to cut off the infected limb. And I knew that when the anesthesia wore off, the pain would be excruciating. But looking back at the house, knowing exactly what Wanda was planning, I knew I had no choice. Tomorrow I would break his heart to save his life. Sunday morning arrived with a sky so blue it felt mocking. The transformation of 42 Oak Street was complete and terrifyingly effective. The manicured lawn, which had been patchy and brown just 2 days ago, was now covered in rented teak flooring and white silk tents. A string quartet was already playing softly in the corner near the ice sculpture tower. It looked like a page out of a glossy lifestyle magazine, but I knew it was just a stage set built on quicksand. I stood near the entrance dressed in a simple black dress, holding a bright orange Hermes box with both hands. It was the only prop I needed. Inside that box sat the future of this family, but to everyone else it looked like a generous tribute from a loving daughter. By 11 o'clock, the driveway was filled with luxury sedans. The members of the Silver Lake Social Club had arrived. These were the women Wanda had spent years trying to impress the gatekeepers of local society, who judged worth by the carat size of a diamond and the label on a handbag. Wanda descended the stairs like she was royalty greeting her subjects. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that I knew cost more than my father's monthly pension check. She had hired a makeup artist to hide the stress lines around her eyes, and for a moment she actually looked the part of the wealthy matriarch she desperately pretended to be. I watched her work the room, clutching a crystal flute of the Dom Perignon I had paid for. She glided from group to group, dragging Trey along with her. I stepped closer, staying just on the periphery to hear her introductions. She stopped in front of Mrs. Gable, the president of the club, a woman who could make or break reputations with a single whisper. "Oh, Mrs. Gable, you simply must meet my son Trey," Wanda gushed, pushing him forward. Trey puffed out his chest, looking ridiculous in a suit that was too tight. He is a young entrepreneur, a venture capitalist actually. He is currently launching a revolutionary crypto platform that is attracting international investors. He is the brilliance of the family. Mrs. Gable looked at Trey with mild interest while I fought the urge to vomit. Then Wanda's eyes slid to me. Her smile did not falter, but her eyes turned cold. "And this is Dominique, Otis's daughter. She works in accounting or something similarly dry. She is single, of course. So married to her job. We try to tell her to get out more, but you know how stepchildren can be." The insult was precise and practiced. She had reduced my decade-long career as a senior forensic auditor, fighting high-level corporate fraud, to accounting. She had dismissed my independence as a failure to find a husband. And she had labeled me the outsider, the stepchild, in the house my mother helped build. The old Dominique would have corrected her. I would have pulled out my business card. I would have defended my title. But today, I just smiled. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice pleasant and hollow. "Wanda is right. I do love my work. I deal with very complex numbers." Wanda laughed, a tinkling artificial sound. "See what I mean? Boring. Now come, let me show you the imported lobster. We had it flown in just for you." I watched them walk away, leaving me standing alone by the entrance. Trey shot me a smirk over his shoulder, mouthing the words, "Nice dress." They were drunk on their own deception. They truly believed they had pulled it off. I looked down at the orange box in my hands, tightening my grip on the textured cardboard. It was the most expensive packaging I had ever purchased for a stack of paper. But as I watched Wanda laugh, throwing her head back in a display of unearned joy, I knew it was worth every penny. The higher she climbed, the harder she would fall, and I was holding the gravity in my hands. By 1 in the afternoon, the humidity had risen, and so had the blood alcohol level of my sister-in-law. The expensive champagne I had purchased was doing its job a little too well. Becky had moved from tipsy to verbally incontinent, and she had cornered Mrs. Gable and the other board members of the Silver Lake Social Club near the dessert table. I stood a few feet away, sipping my sparkling water, watching the train wreck unfold with the dispassionate interest of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. Becky was swaying slightly in her heels, holding a half-empty flute of Dom Perignon, gesturing wildly with a lobster claw she had picked up from the buffet. "You know," she announced, her voice cutting through the polite chatter of the garden party, "it is so inspiring to see you all here. Really it is. I keep telling Trey that he is the exception to the rule. Usually people in your community just do not understand the concept of generational wealth. It is a cultural thing, right?" You guys like to look rich, but you do not know how to actually be rich. The silence that descended on the patio was absolute. The string quartet seemed to falter for a beat. Mrs. Gable, a woman who owned 3 patent holding companies and sat on the board of a major university, looked at Becky with an expression of polite horror. Her friends' women who had built dynasties from scratch tightened their grips on their pearl clutches. Becky, however, was oblivious to the temperature drop in the room. She continued, encouraged by her own voice. "That is why I handle the finances in our house," she slurred, pointing the lobster claw at Trey, who was looking down at his shoes. "I tell him all the time, 'Baby, you have to think like a Rockefeller, not like a rapper. You need that European mindset of accumulation.'" Dominique obviously gets it because she works in corporate, but the rest of the family, oh my god, it is a disaster. If I wasn't here to guide them, they would probably spend all their money on rims and sneakers, right? It was a microaggression so massive it felt like a slap in the face to every person in attendance. It was the kind of ignorant racism that usually gets people thrown out of polite society. I waited for Wanda to step in. I waited for her to defend her guests, her husband, and her own dignity. I waited for her to snatch the drink from Becky's hand and apologize profusely. Instead, Wanda laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched titter, but it was a laugh nonetheless. "Oh, Becky, you are terrible," Wanda chirped, placing a hand on Mrs. Gable's arm, as if they were sharing an inside joke. "She is just saying we do like to enjoy the finer things in life, right, ladies? We know how to have a good time. She does not mean anything by it. She is just protective of Trey, Mrs." Gable pulled her arm away from Wanda's touch as if she had been burned. Her face was made of stone. "I do not think that is what she means at all, Wanda," Mrs. Gable said, her voice like liquid nitrogen. "And I think it is time for us to leave. This party has lost its charm." Wanda's smile faltered, but she was too desperate to let them go. "No, do not go yet," she pleaded, ignoring the insult to her race to save her social standing. "We haven't even opened the gifts yet. Dominique has a big surprise. Please stay, it is the highlight of the day." I looked down at the Rolex on my wrist. It was exactly 1:30. The stage was set. The villains had revealed their true faces. The audience was disgusted. And the victim, my father, was sitting in the corner looking small and confused in his thrift store suit. It was time to end the charade. I stepped forward, clutching the orange box. "You are right, Wanda," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent garden. "Do not leave yet, ladies. You really do not want to miss this." I checked my watch one last time. 0 hour, game over. The gift-giving portion of the afternoon was always the main event for Wanda. She had positioned a velvet armchair in the center of the patio, like a throne, and sat there with an expectant smile as guests lined up to pay tribute. Most people had brought sensible gifts like bottles of wine or spa vouchers, but Wanda's eyes kept darting to the driveway, hoping to see a new luxury car with a red bow. Trey and Becky were up first. They walked to the center of the circle, holding a large rectangular object covered in brown paper. Trey cleared his throat, puffing out his chest. "Mom, Becky and I wanted to get you something that captures your essence, something timeless." He tore the paper away with a flourish, revealing a canvas that made several guests gasp. It was a commissioned portrait of Wanda, but it was horrifyingly bad. The artist had clearly struggled with proportions, making her head too large and her smile look more like a grimace. Even worse, in the background, painted in smaller figures, were Trey and Becky looking angelic, while my father and I were completely absent. "Oh," Wanda exclaimed, her voice pitching up to mask her disappointment. "It is beautiful, so artistic. Thank you, my babies." She hugged them, but I saw her eyes scanning the crowd over Trey's shoulder. She was looking for me. She was looking for the real payout. She didn't care about the ugly painting. She wanted the money she believed I had promised. The master of ceremonies, a local DJ Wanda had hired specifically to announce her name, repeatedly tapped the microphone. "And now, we have a special presentation from the eldest daughter. Dominique Brooks, please come forward." I stepped out from the shadows of the silk tent. The chatter died down. I could feel the eyes of the Silver Lake Social Club members boring into me. They were expecting a grand gesture, something that would redeem my earlier coldness. Wanda sat up straighter, adjusting her silk dress, her greedy eyes locking onto the orange box in my hands. She licked her lips unconsciously. She thought she had won. She thought she had manipulated me into funding her escape. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting the heels of my shoes click against the rented flooring. I stopped directly in front of her. The silence was absolute. I looked down at her, and for a brief second, I felt a flicker of pity. Not for her, but for the emptiness of a life that required this much deception to feel valuable. But then I remembered the foreclosure notice. I remembered my father crying in the dark. I remembered the credit card fraud. The pity evaporated, leaving only cold resolve. Happy Mother's Day. Wanda. I said, my voice amplified by the silence. You told me you wanted something that would solve all your problems, something that would give you true freedom. I think this will do exactly that. I handed her the box. She took it, her hands trembling with anticipation. She tore at the orange ribbon, her nails scratching against the cardboard. She was so eager, so hungry for the wealth she thought was inside. She lifted the lid, and the smile on her face was blinding. Until she looked inside. The microphone felt cold and heavy in my hand like a weapon. I tapped it once, and the sharp feedback sound cut through the humid afternoon air, silencing the last murmurs of the crowd. I looked out at the sea of pastel dresses and linen suits, at the women of the Silver Lake Social Club, who were watching me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Then I looked at Wanda. She was sitting on her velvet throne, clutching a napkin to her chest, her eyes wide with an expectation so raw it was almost obscenely visible. She looked like a predator waiting for the trap to spring, not realizing she was the one caught in the snare. I took a deep breath and let a small, sad smile play on my lips. Thank you all for being here today. I began, my voice steady and clear. We often talk about the sacrifices mothers make, but we rarely talk about the cost, the sheer financial and emotional cost of maintaining a family legacy. Wanda nodded solemnly, dabbing at a dry eye with her napkin, performing the role of the martyred matriarch to perfection. The guests murmured in agreement, swaying to the rhythm of my words. I continued, stepping closer to the edge of the platform. Growing up, Wanda taught me a very valuable lesson. She taught me that everything in this life has a price tag. She taught me that you cannot get something for nothing, and that eventually every debt must be paid. She looked at the world not just as a place to live, but as a series of transactions. And she is right. You cannot build a future without securing your assets. You cannot enjoy the luxury of peace without first paying the bill, Mrs. Gable nodded approvingly, likely thinking I was praising Wanda's business acumen. Wanda herself was beaming, looking around the room to ensure everyone was witnessing this vindication. She thought I was eulogizing her wisdom. She did not understand that I was reading her indictment. I looked directly at her locking eyes with the woman who had tormented my childhood and was currently trying to bankrupt my father. For years I misunderstood you, Wanda. I thought you were just demanding, but now I see that you were just seeking freedom. You wanted to be free from the mundane struggles of daily life. You wanted to be free from the constraints of a budget. You wanted to fly away to places like Paris and leave the heavy lifting to someone else. Wanda let out a small, choked sob of happiness. She covered her mouth with her hand, overcome by what she thought was my submission. The crowd broke into a polite ripple of applause. They saw a daughter finally bowing to her mother. I saw a forensic auditor closing a case file. I walked down the small steps of the stage, the orange Hermes box resting in my palms. The crowd parted for me, creating a path straight to her chair. I could see the greed vibrating off her skin. She reached out her hands before I even arrived, unable to contain herself. I stood over her, and the applause died down, replaced by a thick, anticipatory silence. I held the box out. Inside this box is the answer to everything you have been planning. I said, my voice dropping to an intimate whisper that only she and the front row could hear. You wanted a new life, Wanda. You wanted to leave everything behind. I am giving you exactly that. I placed the box in her manicured hands. She gripped it tight, her knuckles turning white. Open it, Mom, I said, my voice hardening just a fraction. This is the freedom I give you. Open it and see what you have truly earned. The lid of the orange box lifted with a soft sigh of vacuum-sealed cardboard. Wanda reached inside, her movements jerky with greed. She was expecting the heavy velvet weight of a jewelry box, or perhaps the cold metal of a car key. The smile on her face was so wide it looked painful, stretching the limits of her Botox injections. She was already composing her acceptance speech in her head, ready to tell the ladies of the Silver Lake Social Club how she had raised such a generous daughter. But her hand did not find velvet. It found paper. Her brow furrowed in confusion for a fraction of a second. She likely thought it was a deed to a vacation home, or perhaps a stack of bearer bonds. She pulled the thick bundle of documents out, holding them up to the sunlight. The crisp white legal paper contrasted sharply with her manicured red nails. The crowd leaned in, breath held, waiting to see the magnitude of the gift. Mrs. Gable in the front row adjusted her glasses, trying to get a better look. Wanda's eyes focused on the top page. I watched the process of comprehension happen in slow motion. I saw her eyes scan the header. I saw her pupils dilate. The document was not subtle. My lawyer had ensured that the header was printed in standard bold font, but the stamp across the center was aggressive and undeniable. It read, "Notice of Eviction," in heavy red ink. Below that, in smaller but equally clear type, were the words, "Property ownership transfer and foreclosure cancellation." The color drained from Wanda's face so fast it looked like a physical magic trick. One moment she was flushed with champagne and triumph. The next, she was a pale gray ghost. The triumphant smile that had been plastered on her face for the last 3 hours did not just fade, it shattered. It fell from her face, leaving behind a slack-jawed expression of pure horror. Her hands began to shake violently, causing the papers to rustle loudly in the silent garden. "Is it tickets to Paris, Mrs.?" Gable asked from the front row, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "Oh, Wanda, do not keep us in suspense. Read it to us." Wanda could not speak. Her throat had closed up. She looked up at me, and for the first time in my life, I did not see the arrogance or the cruelty. I saw fear, naked primal fear. She looked down at the paper again, hoping she had misread it, hoping it was a prank. But the words were still there. Plaintiffs First City Bank and Dominique Brooks. Defendants Otis and Wanda Brooks. She was holding her own demise, and she knew it. The silence stretched out tight as a piano wire ready to snap. She looked at Trey for help, but he was too busy admiring his own reflection in a spoon to notice his mother's world ending. I stepped closer, leaning into the microphone to deliver the final blow. I leaned into the microphone. The feedback had faded, leaving only the sound of the wind in the trees and the rustle of the paper in Wanda's shaking hands. "You seem to be having trouble reading the fine print, Wanda," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the garden. "Let me summarize it for everyone." I swept my gaze across the stunned guests, ensuring every member of the Silver Lake Social Club heard every syllable. As of close of business yesterday, this property was legally seized by First City Bank due to default on a high-interest cash-out refinance loan that has not been paid in 6 months. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Gable covered her mouth, looking from Wanda to me with wide, horrified eyes. Wanda's face was a mask of pure terror. She tried to speak to deny it, but no sound came out. However, the bank did not auction it off. I continued, my voice deadly calm. They sold the debt note. To me. I pointed a steady finger at the ground beneath my feet. I am the sole lien holder. I am the owner of this estate. And the document in your hands, Wanda, is not a gift certificate. It is a notice to vacate the premises immediately due to insolvency and fraud. The glass of champagne in Wanda's other hand slipped. It shattered on the rented teak flooring, the expensive liquid splashing onto her shoes. She looked like she had been slapped. The veneer of the wealthy matriarch dissolved instantly, revealing the terrified fraudster beneath. The guests began to back away, creating a physical distance between themselves and the social contagion of bankruptcy. Then, the explosion happened. Trey, who had been too busy admiring his reflection in a silver spoon to pay attention, finally processed the words. He lunged forward, knocking over a velvet chair. "You are lying!" he screamed, his face turning a blotchy red. He stormed up the steps of the stage, getting right in my face, violating my personal space with the aggression of a cornered animal. "You are crazy, Dominique. You are just jealous. This is Mom and Dad's house. You cannot just buy a house like it is a pair of shoes. Who do you think you are?" He spun around, addressing the crowd, desperate to salvage the illusion. "She is mentally unstable, everyone. Ignore her. She has always been jealous of our success. This is just some sick prank because she is bitter about being single. Get out of here, Dominique, before I call the cops." I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I looked at Trey with the same bored expression I used for tax auditors who tried to bluff me with empty threats. "Actually, Trey, I think the police would be very interested in this conversation, especially regarding the wire fraud you committed to fund your non-existent crypto scheme using your father's identity." Trey froze. His bluster faltered and his eyes darted nervously to Becky, who was staring at him with her mouth open. "But since you think I am lying," I continued, raising my voice over his heavy breathing, "let us look at the evidence. I believe in total transparency." I raised my hand and signaled to the technician standing by the large projection screen that had been set up for the sentimental family slideshow Wanda had planned. The technician nodded. The screen flickered to life. The static image of flowers vanished. In its place, a crisp, high-definition video feed appeared. It was the security footage from yesterday. The timestamp was visible in the corner. The audio kicked in loud and clear, booming through the garden speakers. It was time for the world to see the real Wanda Brooks. The giant screen behind me illuminated the garden with the harsh white glare of a scanned legal document. The guests squinted against the brightness, murmuring as they recognized the letterhead of a predatory lending firm. It was the deed of trust, the document that had sealed my father's financial coffin. I pulled a laser pointer from my clutch and aimed a steady red dot at the bottom of the page. Exhibit A. I announced, my voice cutting through the humid air like a scalpel. "This is the mortgage agreement dated November 15th. It authorizes a cash-out refinance of $200,000. I moved the red dot to the signature line. "And here is the authorization. That says Otis Brooks. But look closer." I magnified the image on the screen. "My father has severe arthritis in his right hand. He struggles to hold a coffee cup, let alone sign his name with such elegant fluid loops. This signature does not have the tremors of an 80-year-old man. It has the flourish of a desperate woman." I turned to look at Wanda, who was now gripping the armrests of her velvet chair so hard her knuckles were white. "You forged his signature, Wanda. You committed felony fraud to strip the equity from the home he worked 30 years to pay off." Wanda opened her mouth to speak, likely to scream another lie, but I did not give her the chance. I clicked the remote in my hand. The image on the screen shifted. The loan document disappeared, replaced by a complex spreadsheet. Rows and columns of numbers filled the display. But the fraud is only the method. I continued, pacing slowly across the stage. The real story is the motive. $200,000 deposited into the joint account on November 16th. By April 1st, the balance was zero. As a forensic auditor, my job is simple. I follow the money. So let us see where the house went. I clicked the remote again, highlighting the first major transaction in neon yellow. November 17th, wire transfer, $50,000 to TB Ventures, LLC. I looked at Trey. He was sweating now, the perspiration soaking through his tight suit. TB Ventures stands for Trey Brooks. Ventures, doesn't it, Trey? You told everyone you secured an angel investor for your crypto platform. You did not tell them the angel was your stepfather's roof. The crowd gasped. Mrs. Gable turned to look at Trey with undisguised disgust. I clicked again. December 3rd. $30,000 transferred to an account ending in 409. That account belongs to Rebecca Smith. I looked at Becky, who was trembling next to the dessert table. You told us your parents sent you money for a new car. You were lying. You were driving a vehicle paid for by the elderly man you just mocked for being poor. I clicked rapidly now, bringing up charge after charge. $20,000 to Serenity Spa. $15,000 to Saks Fifth Avenue. $10,000 for first-class tickets to Tulum. You did not use a dime of this money for the house, Wanda. You did not fix the roof. You did not repair the plumbing. You ate this house. You wore it. You drank it. And now you have nothing left to show for it but a closet full of clothes and a criminal record. I took my eyes off the damning spreadsheet and looked for the only person in the garden who mattered. My father was standing near the ice sculpture, his plate of untouched lobster trembling in his hand. He was staring up at the screen at the magnified image of the forged signature that bore his name. I watched the color drain from his face until he looked like a ghost haunting his own life. He wasn't looking at numbers. He was looking at 10 years of betrayal. He looked down at his suit, the polyester blend he had been so proud of, and then back at Wanda. The realization didn't hit him like a wave. It hit him like a bullet. The woman he had defended against me, the woman he had gone into debt for, hadn't just made a mistake. She had systematically liquidated his existence. He dropped the plate. The crash of porcelain shattering against the patio stones was louder than any scream. Wanda heard the crash and saw Otis's face. For a split second, panic flickered in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by desperation. She realized the narrative was slipping away, and with it her freedom. She let out a feral shriek that sounded nothing like the refined society lady she pretended to be. "Turn it off!" she screamed, hitching up her expensive silk dress and charging toward the technical booth. "You are lying. This is all fake." She lunged for the projector table, her red claws extended intent on ripping the cables out of the machine to make the truth disappear. But I had anticipated this. I nodded to the side of the stage. Two large men in dark suits, the security detail I had hired under the guise of parking attendants, stepped forward instantly. They formed a human wall between Wanda and the equipment. One of them caught her wrist mid-air, stopping her rampage with professional indifference. "Ma'am, you need to step back," the guard said, his voice low and firm. Wanda thrashed against his grip, her hair coming loose from its perfect bun. "Let me go. This is my house. That is my projector. I order you to turn it off." She was hysterical, a cornered animal, realizing the cage door had just locked. The chaos seemed to snap Becky out of her shock. Seeing her mother-in-law restrained triggered something in her alcohol-soaked brain. She threw her empty champagne glass onto the grass and stomped toward the stage, her face twisted into an ugly mask of self-righteous fury. "What is wrong with you?" she shrieked, her voice cracking as she pointed a shaking finger at me. "It is Mother's Day. Who does this? You invited all these people here. You paid for all this food just to ambush us. You are sick, Dominique. You are an absolute devil. Look at what you are doing to her. She is crying. She is your mother." I looked down at Becky, who was vibrating with misplaced indignation. She didn't care about the theft. She didn't care about the forgery. She only cared that the party was ruined. She was defending the indefensible because without Wanda's grift, Becky's free ride ended too. I didn't yell back. I just looked at her with pity. "She is not my mother, Becky," I said calmly into the microphone. "She is the defendant, and you are just collateral damage." I turned back to the technician. "Play the audio." The garden went deadly silent as the giant screen flickered from the spreadsheet to a live-action video feed. It was the footage from yesterday, crystal clear in high definition. The guests craned their necks, watching the scene unfold in the kitchen I had supposedly hired contractors to renovate. On screen, Wanda was leaning against the granite counter, holding a mimosa, looking at Trey with a conspiratorial smirk. The timestamp in the corner marked the time as 11:42 a.m. I nodded to the technician and he pushed the volume slider to the max. Wanda's voice boomed through the high-end speakers I had paid for clearer than it had ever been in real life. "He is such a useless old fool," the digital Wanda sneered, swirling her drink. "Otis actually thanked me for the suit. Can you believe it?" He stood there with tears in his eyes. He is so pathetic. On the screen, Trey laughed, grabbing a shrimp. "You are cold, Mom. What happens when the bank comes on Monday?" The digital Wanda waved her hand dismissively. "Who cares? By the time the sheriff kicks the door down, we will be over the Atlantic. I got him to sign the papers last week while he was groggy from his meds. He thought it was just updated insurance forms. He signed his own life away and didn't even read the fine print. We take the cash, we go to Paris, and we let the state deal with him. He is dead weight, Trey. I am done pretending to be a nursemaid to a pauper." The audio cut out as the technician paused the frame on Wanda's sneering face. The reaction in the garden was visceral. It wasn't just a gasp. It was a collective recoil, as if a physical blow had struck the crowd. Mrs. Gable looked physically ill, her hand flying to her throat. The ladies of the Silver Lake Social Club, who tolerated gossip but despised cruelty, stared at Wanda with unmasked revulsion. There was no spinning this. There was no misunderstanding. They had just heard her confess to fraud, elder abuse, and premeditated abandonment in her own voice. Wanda stood frozen near the stage, her face stripping of all color until she looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. She didn't scream this time. She didn't fight the guards. She just stared at the screen, realizing that the insurance she had bragged about was actually her own indictment. But the most devastating sound wasn't the video. It was a low, strangled cry from the back of the room. I turned just in time to see my father. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at the ground, his left hand clutching the fabric of his cheap suit over his heart. His face was contorted in a mask of agony that went deeper than physical pain. He swayed once, his knees buckling under the weight of the truth. "Dad!" I shouted, dropping the microphone. It was too late. Otis collapsed. He didn't hit the floor. He crumbled into one of the white folding chairs, his body going limp, as if his strings had been cut. The silence of the garden was shattered by the sound of the chair scraping violently against the patio stones. He gasped for air, his eyes rolling back, unable to process the magnitude of the knife his wife had just twisted in his back. I sprinted off the stage, kicking off my heels so I could run faster across the grass. I reached my father just as his head lolled forward. I knelt beside him, ignoring the stain of damp earth on my dress, and grabbed his cold hands. His pulse was thready, fluttering like a trapped bird. "Dad, look at me." I cupped his face, forcing him to focus. "It is okay. I am here. It is over." He blinked, his eyes swimming with tears. He looked past me at Wanda, who was standing motionless by the projector, and a sob raked his chest. "She sold me out, Dom," he whispered, his voice broken. "She was going to leave me." I pulled him into a hug, shielding him from the stares of the crowd. "I know, Dad, but she can't hurt you anymore. You are safe now." I signaled to the paramedics I had on standby in the driveway, another precaution I had taken, knowing the shock might be too much for him. As the medics moved in to check his vitals, I stood up. The fear and sadness in my chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, white-hot fury. I turned to face the trio of parasites standing by the buffet table. The guests had backed away, leaving Wanda, Trey, and Becky isolated on an island of shame. Wanda was trembling, her makeup running in dark streaks. Trey looked ready to bolt. Becky was sobbing, clutching her Chanel bag, my old bag, like a life preserver. I did not scream. I did not shout. I used the voice I reserved for hostile takeovers. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, my voice cutting through the garden. "My father is leaving with me. He will never spend another night under this roof with the people who plotted to destroy him." Wanda took a step forward, her hands shaking. Dominique, please. We can talk about this. We are family. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Family. You forfeited that title when you signed that fraudulent loan. You are not family, you are trespassers. I pointed to the ground. This house belongs to me now. Every brick, every beam, every blade of grass. You have exactly 60 minutes to pack your personal effects and get off my property. Trey stepped forward, trying to muster some bravado. You can't do that. We have rights. You have to give us 30 days' notice. I shook my head slowly. You really should read the paperwork, Trey. This isn't a standard eviction. This is an immediate removal due to criminal activity on the premises. I have the police on speed dial, and I have the evidence of wire fraud queued up on that screen. You can leave in your car, or you can leave in a squad car. It is your choice. I turned to the large security guard standing by the gate. Escort them inside. Watch them pack. If they try to take anything that isn't clothing or toiletries, if they touch a single piece of furniture, electronics, or silverware, detain them for theft. Wanda looked at the guards, then at the horrified faces of her society friends, and finally at me. She realized there was no charm left to work. The game was over. She slumped, looking suddenly old and small. I walked over to the banquet table where the uneaten lobster and warm champagne sat as a testament to their greed. I was still holding the thick packet of legal documents. I slammed the eviction notice down onto a platter of untouched shrimp. The sauce splattered onto the white tablecloth like blood. Here is your party favor, Wanda. Take it. Get out of my house. And do not let the door hit you on the way to the street. The silence that followed the crashing of the eviction notice was short-lived. It was broken by the sound of silk tearing as Wanda threw herself to her knees. The dignity she had worn like a costume for decades evaporated instantly. She crawled across the rented teak flooring, ignoring the lobster sauce staining her dress, and reached for my father's legs. She looked pathetic, a weeping mess of smeared mascara and desperation, clutching at the trousers of the man she had called a useless fool just minutes ago. "Otis, baby, listen to me," she wailed, her voice cracking into a shrill plea. "It wasn't my idea. I swear on my life. It was Trey. He made me do it. He said he was in trouble with bad people. He said they would hurt us if I didn't get the money. I did it to protect you, Otis. I was trying to save our family from his mistakes." The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. I watched Trey's face turn a deep, violacious purple. The business mogul act vanished, replaced by the cornered rat he truly was. He kicked a chair aside and pointed a shaking finger at his mother. "You are a liar," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You came to me with the plan. You said you were tired of waiting for him to die. And don't look at me like that, Dom. I didn't spend the money. It was Becky. She is the one who needed the new car. She is the one who demanded the first-class trips. She told me she would leave me if I didn't upgrade her lifestyle. I was just trying to keep my wife happy." Becky gasped, her mouth dropping open in genuine shock. She swung her Chanel bag, hitting Trey squarely in the chest. "You spineless coward! You told me you were a crypto millionaire. You told me that money was your bonus. I didn't know you were stealing from a pensioner. Do not drag me into your felony." It was a shark tank where the sharks had started eating each other. They stood in a triangle of hate-screaming accusations, revealing every ugly truth they had hidden behind their fake smiles. The air was thick with their venom. Around them, the garden had turned into a spectacle. The members of the Silver Lake Social Club were no longer polite guests. They were an audience witnessing a train wreck. Mrs. Gable, the woman whose approval Wanda had craved above all else, held up her iPhone. She wasn't calling the police. She was live streaming. I could see the red recording dot blinking. Within minutes, the video of Wanda Brooks groveling in lobster sauce while her family tore itself apart would be circulating through every country club in Atlanta. Their social death was happening in real-time broadcast to the very world they tried so hard to impress. My father watched them for a long moment, his chest heaving. The paramedics hovered nearby, but he waved them off. He looked at the woman on her knees, then at the son screaming at his wife. The confusion in his eyes cleared, replaced by a cold, absolute clarity. He reached for his left hand. With a slow, deliberate movement, he twisted the gold band that had sat on his finger for 12 years. It was tight, but he pulled it off with a grunt of effort. He looked at the ring, then looked down at Wanda. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply flicked his wrist. The ring hit Wanda in the forehead with a dull thwack and bounced onto the sauce-stained tablecloth. "It is over, Wanda," he said, his voice raspy but unbreakable. "You wanted to be free. You are free. Now get out of my daughter's house." The wail of sirens cut through the humid afternoon air, effectively silencing the family feud. I checked my watch. The response time was impeccable. 2 squad cars screeched into the driveway, their blue and red lights reflecting off the silver ice bucket and the tear-streaked faces of my relatives. I had called the precinct non-emergency line 30 minutes ago to report a potential domestic disturbance, but given Trey's escalation, the officers arrived ready for a fight. Trey saw the uniforms and his eyes went wild. He looked from the approaching officers to me, and I saw the exact moment his self-preservation instinct snapped into violent rage. He decided that if he was going down, he was taking me with him. "You did this," he roared, his veins bulging in his neck. "You ruined my life, you witch!" He lunged at me. It was a clumsy, desperate charge fueled by adrenaline and humiliation. The crowd screamed. My father tried to stand up to protect me, but he was too weak. I stood my ground, not because I was brave, but because I saw the officer behind him. Before Trey could get within 5 feet of me, a taser dart hit his shoulder. He convulsed and hit the deck hard, face planting into the rented flooring. 2 officers were on him instantly, knees and his back zip ties securing his wrists behind him. "Get off me!" he screamed, spitting grass and dirt. "I did nothing wrong. This is a family dispute." The lead officer hauled him up by his collar. "Actually, Mr. Brooks, this is a bit more than a dispute. We ran your plates when we pulled up, and then we ran your name. You have an outstanding felony warrant out of Florida for investment fraud. Looks like you skipped bail on a Ponzi scheme charge 2 years ago." I smiled calmly. I had forwarded that information to the district attorney's office while Wanda was opening her gift. It was the final loose end tied up in a neat bow. Trey went limp as the reality of prison time washed over him. The officers dragged him toward the patrol car past the horrified guests who were capturing every second on their smartphones. Wanda and Becky were next. They were not in handcuffs, but their punishment was perhaps worse. An officer approached them, his hand resting on his belt. "Ladies, the owner has requested you vacate the property immediately. You have 5 minutes to grab your purses and leave, or we will charge you with criminal trespass." Wanda looked at her society friends, hoping for a savior, but they all looked away, pretending to inspect their manicures. She had become a social leper in the span of an hour. She grabbed her purse, clutching it like a shield, and began the long walk down the driveway. Becky followed, her mascara running down her cheeks, looking at her feet. They walked past the luxury cars, past the neighbors peering out their windows, and out of our lives. The silence they left behind was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The sirens had faded into the distance, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence in the garden. The sun was still shining, which felt almost insulting after the storm that had just destroyed my family. The guests had fled like rats escaping a sinking ship, leaving behind half-eaten lobster and overturned chairs. The Silver Lake Social Club had seen enough drama to last them a decade, and they had taken their gossip and their judgment with them. Now it was just me and my father, amidst the ruins of Wanda's vanity. The melting ice sculpture dripped rhythmically onto the rented flooring, counting down the seconds of the aftermath. My father sat on the edge of the stage, his head in his hands. He looked small. The cheap thrift store suit he had been so proud of earlier now hung on him like a shroud. He was staring at the empty ring finger on his left hand, rubbing the pale strip of skin where the gold band had sat for 12 years. He looked like a man who had woken up from a coma, only to find his entire world had burned down while he slept. I walked over to him, stepping over a smashed champagne flute. I sat down next to him, not saying a word. I just offered my presence as an anchor in the chaos. He didn't look up. His shoulders began to shake. At first it was silent, but then a sound tore out of him that broke my heart. It was a guttural, raw sob of pure shame. He covered his face, attempting to hide his tears, but they leaked through his trembling fingers. "I am so sorry, Dominique." He choked out, his voice thick with grief. "I am so sorry, baby girl. I was so blind. I let them treat you like a stranger in your own home. I let them steal from me, but worse, I let them disrespect you. I was just so lonely after your mother died. I was so afraid of the silence. I traded my dignity for company, and I paid for it with everything I had. I am a weak old man. I don't deserve your help." I reached out and took his hands, pulling them away from his face. I held them tight, feeling the calluses of the man who had worked double shifts to put me through college. I didn't see a weak man. I saw a victim who had survived a long con. "Dad, look at me," I said softly, forcing him to meet my eyes. "You are not weak. You are human. They preyed on your kindness. They weaponized your grief against you. That is not your fault. That is their crime. Do not apologize for loving the wrong people. Apologize to yourself for forgetting your own worth. But that stops today." He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen, searching for judgment and finding only love. "You really bought the house?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You really saved me." I smiled, wiping a tear from his cheek. "I bought the house, Dad. But I didn't do it to keep it. This place is poisoned with bad memories. We are going to sell it. We are going to get you a condo downtown near my office. We are going to get you a real suit. And we are going to go to dinner every Sunday, just you and me. No parasites, no drama." I stood up and pulled him to his feet. He leaned on me, heavy with exhaustion, but standing upright. I looked around the wrecked garden one last time. The eviction notice was still lying on the table, a tombstone for the Brooks family drama. "Let us go home, Dad," I said, guiding him toward the gate. "We are starting over. Right now. 3 months is not a long time in the grand scheme of the universe, but it is long enough for gravity to completely crush a house of cards." The fall from grace for the Brooks family was not just steep, it was vertical. I did not need to hire a private investigator to know where they ended up. The court records and the grapevine provided all the satisfaction I needed. Wanda found her freedom, but it did not look like Paris. It looked like the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the interstate, where the sheets were thin and the clientele was transient. She was not a guest there. She was the help. At 55 years old, the woman who once refused to drink anything less than vintage wine was now pushing a heavy housekeeping cart down a hallway that smelled of stale smoke and industrial bleach. I heard she had been fired from 2 other jobs for attitude problems before desperation forced her to humble herself. Her shift ended at 6, but she did not go home to a granite kitchen. She walked to the back of the parking lot to a rusted 10-year-old sedan she had bought with the last of her pawned jewelry. The back seat was piled high with garbage bags containing her clothes, the only remnants of her former life. She sat in the driver's seat, eating a cold gas station sandwich, staring at the peeling paint of the motel wall. The society lady was now homeless, living paycheck to paycheck, washing strangers' dirty towels to buy fuel for a car that wasn't going anywhere. Trey's reality was even smaller. He had traded his tailored suits for a bright orange jumpsuit that did nothing for his complexion. He was currently residing in the county detention center, awaiting trial on 3 counts of wire fraud and identity theft. His bail had been set at $100,000, a sum he could not pay because his crypto wallet was empty and his mother was destitute. The visionary entrepreneur was now inmate 8940. He spent his days not in boardrooms, but in a 6x8 cell, listening to the toilet flush and trying to avoid eye contact with the hardened criminals who didn't care about his blockchain theories. His lawyer had already told him the plea deal involved 5 to 7 years in federal prison. The look on his face in the mugshot was not arrogance. It was the terrified realization that he was no longer the main character of his own life. And then there was Becky, the survivor, the parasite who knew exactly when to detach from a dying host. She filed for divorce 3 days after the arrest, citing irreconcilable differences. She didn't visit Trey. She didn't help Wanda. She packed her fake designer bags and retreated to the safety of her parents' basement in the suburbs. She was back to being a child screaming at her own mother for buying the wrong brand of oat milk while scrolling through dating apps looking for the next man to fund her lifestyle. She had learned nothing. She was just waiting for the next opportunity to bleed someone dry. They were all exactly where they belonged: scattered, broken, and irrelevant. They had wanted the world without working for it, and the world had responded by taking everything back. I closed the file on my laptop and took a sip of my coffee. The audit was finally complete. The balance sheet was zeroed out. Justice, it turned out, was the only luxury they couldn't afford. The sold sign on the lawn of 42 Oak Street was not just a real estate transaction, it was an exorcism. I did not want to profit from the misery that had taken place within those walls, so I sold it below market value to a young couple who knew nothing of the fraud and heartbreak that had soaked into the floorboards. They saw a fixer-upper. I saw a crime scene. I signed the closing papers with a sense of immense relief, washing my hands of the physical tether to Wanda and her greed. We moved 2 weeks later. I bought a villa in the hills, a gated sanctuary with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the light my father had been denied for so long. The deed was firmly in my name, a non-negotiable protective measure to ensure that no one could ever sign his security away again. But the home was ours. I gave him the master suite on the ground floor overlooking the garden. When he first walked in, carrying the few boxes of personal items we had salvaged, he hesitated in the doorway, afraid to take up space. "It is too much, Dom," he whispered, looking at the marble floors. "I don't need all this luxury." I took his hand and led him inside. "You are not a guest here, Dad. You are the patriarch. This is what respect looks like." The first month was about deprogramming. Otis was like a prisoner of war adjusting to freedom. He would flinch when the phone rang, terrified it was a debt collector, or Wanda screaming for money. But slowly, the silence of the new house began to heal him. I established a new routine. Sunday mornings were no longer for dreading family drama. They were for education. We sat at the kitchen island with coffee, and I taught him everything Wanda had kept hidden. I showed him how to read a bank statement, how to track his pension, and how to identify phishing scams. At first, he was ashamed of his ignorance, but that shame quickly turned into empowerment. He realized that money was not a mysterious monster, it was just math. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly how much he had and where it was going. He was reclaiming his agency, one spreadsheet at a time. But the biggest change happened when I drove him to the local community center. He had resisted at first, convinced that everyone would judge him for his failed marriage. Instead, he found a group of retired veterans who didn't care about social climbing or designer labels. They cared about chess politics and who could tell the best story. I went to pick him up one afternoon and found him sitting at a card table, slamming a domino down with a triumphant shout. He was laughing. It was a deep, chest-rattling sound I hadn't heard in a decade. He wasn't the hunched, broken man in the polyester suit anymore. He was Otis again. He saw me waiting and waved a smile, lighting up his face that didn't have a trace of fear in it. The wound was still there, scarring over slowly, but the infection was gone. We were finally breathing clean air. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold that felt almost too perfect to be real. It was a stark contrast to the humidity and hysteria of the garden party 3 months ago. I sat on the travertine terrace of our new villa, a glass of Pinot Noir resting near my hand. The air here was cleaner, thinner, and completely free of the scent of desperation. Inside, through the open sliding glass doors, I could hear the faint sound of the television. Dad was watching a baseball game, cheering at the screen with a beer in his hand. It was the sound of normalcy, a luxury we had fought hard to retrieve. I picked up my tablet and refreshed the banking app. The numbers on the screen were crisp and black. Even after selling the old house at a discount to move it quickly, the profit margin was substantial. I had bought the non-performing debt note from the bank for pennies on the dollar, and the equity I recovered upon the sale was more than enough to cover the down payment on this sanctuary. It was the final irony of the entire saga. Wanda had tried to steal a fortune that didn't exist, and in stopping her, I had inadvertently created real wealth. She had played checkers while I was playing three-dimensional chess. I swiped the app closed. The ledger was finally balanced. The liabilities, namely Wanda Trey and Becky, were written off. The assets, my father and my peace of mind, were secured and appreciating in value. I took a sip of wine, feeling the cool evening breeze against my skin. It felt like victory. It felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for 10 years. I set the glass down and looked up. I didn't look at the horizon. I looked right at you. I looked directly into the lens, breaking the invisible barrier that had separated us this entire time. My expression remained cool, professional, the face of a woman who knows the audit is finally over. People love to say that money cannot buy happiness. I said, my voice calm and conversational. It is a comforting lie told by those who have never felt the crushing weight of financial helplessness. They tell you to focus on love, on family, on the intangible things. They tell you that wealth is the root of all evil. And sure, they have a point. Money cannot fix a broken heart. It cannot cure a terminal illness. It cannot buy you a personality. I leaned forward slightly, the ghost of a smile touching my lips. But let us be real for a second. Money can buy a high-definition security system to record the truth. Money can hire a shark of a lawyer to navigate the fine print. Money can buy the deed to a house before the bank auctions it off to strangers. And most importantly, money buys you the ability to say no. It buys you the power to pack the bags of the parasites who are draining your soul and kick them to the curb. It buys you the silence I am hearing right now. It buys you the exit strategy. I raised my glass in a mock toast to the empty air, to the memory of the woman who taught me the hardest lesson of my life. So to everyone out there dealing with their own, Wanda, remember this. Get your finances in order. Protect your assets. Because sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is a clean balance sheet. Happy Mother's Day. I took one last sip, and the image cut instantly to black. The heavy bass of a hip-hop track kicked in, playing over the scrolling credits. The most profound lesson from this story is that financial literacy is the ultimate form of self-defense. We often romanticize family as a sanctuary of unconditional love, but as Otis discovered, blind trust can be an invitation for exploitation. He nearly lost his life's work, not because of a lack of intelligence, but because of a lack of vigilance. He surrendered his financial agency to keep the peace, only to find that the price of that peace was his dignity. Dominique's ruthless efficiency teaches us that money is more than currency. It is a boundary enforcer. It provides the leverage needed to cut out toxicity and protect the vulnerable. The story illustrates that you cannot save your loved ones with just good intentions. You need resources, legal knowledge, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. True security means verifying before you sign and understanding that no is a complete sentence. Protecting your assets is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of survival. In a world full of Wandas, you must be your own auditor. Stop leaving your future in someone else's hands. Review your accounts, check your legal standing, and take control of your financial narrative today.